Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Inhaled Insulin. Fast in, fast out fits your lifestyle. By Omnipod, simplify life with Omnipod 5. And by Dexcom G7, the most accurate CGM system.
This is Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
Hi, everybody. I am your host, Stacey Sims. And yes, the podcast sounds a little different already because of my travel schedule, the July 4th holiday, moving my daughter to her new place and her new job. I'm running a classic episode. Having just come back from the big family conference, Friends for Life, I thought this episode about Benny going to Israel for a month at age 16 would be fitting because I got a lot of questions while I was at that conference about independence. If you're interested in learning more about how we do stuff like this, everything from packing for a month abroad to the baby steps of independence that can happen even before kindergarten. I mean, remember, Benny was diagnosed at 2. I'd love you to check out my book series, The World's Worst Diabetes Mom. Especially the second book has a lot of information about how you go from a toddler who, you need to do everything for a kid that age to an 18-year-old who is 100% independent. I'm honestly some days not sure which is harder on me. I'm leaving the original introduction to the interview here. There's some information there, as well as what follows, which is all about why I love Friends for Life. This episode first aired in August of 2021. And I've talked about this for a while on the show. We have been planning for quite some time. But if you are brand new, earlier this summer, we sent our son Benny to Israel for 4 weeks. I still can't believe we did it. Bit of background. He has attended this regular summer camp about 4 hours away from us in Georgia since he was 8 years old. That first year for 2 weeks and for a month every year since, except 2020, of course, due to COVID. He also goes to diabetes camp. He started going to the Sleepaway diabetes camp for a week when he was 7. He went to a little day camp in our area. He mentions that it's called Kudos. He went to that when I want to say he was 3 or 4 years old. He was very, very little, and that's a wonderful program as well. But for this year of the regular camp, when you are a junior, when you're going to be a junior in high school, there is an option to go to Israel. So while we don't know all the staff who went, we know the program. They know us, the kids know Benny, and they know the type 1 situation as much as friends can. Even so, this was really hard. It was mostly hard just for me. But I'm going to come back after the interview and tell you a little bit about the lowest moment I had for real when he was away. And how it was honestly perfectly timed. I was so lucky to have the support that I did. I'll do that after the interview. A couple of notes before this interview. If you are new to the show and you haven't heard any of my interviews with Benny before, he is a bit silly. He's a bit sarcastic. And, I think our whole parenting, our family style leans a bit toward darker humor. So please know, and I'm sure I don't have to say this, we take diabetes very seriously. He is in great hands in terms of healthcare, and our endo, who we've been seeing him since Benny was 2, thinks we're doing great. I also want to say that I am a bit troubled by the comments you're going to hear Benny make about diabetes camp, but I'm choosing to leave them in. Look, it's how he feels right now. Just remember when you listen, this is a 16-year-old who may not have the best memory of when he was younger, but I know how much he loved diabetes camp and how important it was for the confidence that you're coming from him now. And we'll revisit this issue when he gets older, but we have done other episodes about how much he liked camp. So I'm going to link those up as well if you want to listen. But look, how you feel is how you feel, and that can change at different ages. Doesn't make it any less valid. So I'm leaving those comments in. And after you listen to the interview, if you have any questions or stuff you'd like us to follow up on, please reach out. You can always go to diabetes-connections.com and contact me through the website. We have a Facebook group, Diabetes Connections, the group. And of course, I'm all over social media. But I'd love to know what you think, especially those of you who have teenagers or you adults who were not teenagers so long ago. I'm curious to know because I wonder and I worry sometimes about being so open about this. We are so far from perfect. I do worry a little bit about, some backlash, frankly, and some people thinking we're really doing it wrong. So let me know what you think, but be nice about it. Hi, Benny. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing very well. You've been home for 3 weeks. How are you settling in?
Great. I want to go back. I miss my friends.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm glad you had a good time. So I have a lot of questions for you from listeners. Stop.
Hi, listeners.
Parents and adults with type 1. But first, let me just ask you, how was the trip? I mean, I know, but tell everybody how the trip was.
Very, very fun.
We'll talk more in detail about diabetes stuff, but did it meet your expectations? Like, was it a good time?
Honestly, the most fun was when they just kind of let us do whatever in the hotels.
History, religion, majesty, no big shakes, just hanging out with your friends.
2 days before we went to some banana boating thing, all the counselors were talking about how much fun it is. Like, they all did it, and it's super cool, and it was really boring.
Oh, you're the worst. All right, so let's talk diabetes stuff.
Okay.
We planned a lot of this. We talked to the staff, and they knew you because you'd been there for a long time. But
not all the staff knew me. I had one of the counselors as a counselor at Camp Coleman 2 years back. 3 years back. And then one of the other counselors was in our unit early.
I guess my point is you have been to this camp since you were 8 years old. So while perhaps the people that were on your bus, the staff weren't familiar, the system, the people that I needed to talk to understood that this was just, you didn't just show up that day and say, I'd like to hang out with these campers. So they knew who you were. So we did a lot of planning in advance that I can talk about at a different time because I don't want to get you bogged down in all of that. But let's start with what involved you, which was the packing. Anything to share? I mean, we just went through and figured out what you needed and then added half more. We gave you like 150% of what we thought you needed. How'd that go for you?
I didn't touch 80% of what was packed, medical-wise.
Almost all of it.
I mean, there wasn't much need for it all. Like, it was nice to have it in case I did need it. Most of it was like die-hard situation, like if you're going through the desert for 18 weeks and then swimming through the Negev. What?
I don't know if you can swim through it. But I mean, like, knock wood, we sent you with, I think, 2 Baqsimis and 1 Gvoke hypo pen. Mm-hmm. So you didn't use any of that, right? Yeah. So that kind of stuff.
Thank God.
Oh, of course. We sent you with more insulin than you needed normally, and you used a ton less insulin, which we'll talk about.
Well, I used most of the vials that you sent me with.
Right. But I sent you with pens also. Yeah. I sent you with lots of extra stuff. I'm curious, and I mean, not to put you on the spot, but why don't you use a nice medical bag? Why won't you let me send you with something that is organized easily instead
because
of the
that
blob?
Is too much work.
The blob of a bag that you use.
Too much work.
It's so gross. It's one big compartment.
It works. It does its job.
We do break it up with little bags inside, but I got to tell you, I know it's not me, but I would get like a nice medical bag with little compartments.
Find a medical bag. And we can talk about it.
I have like 10 that I would get for you.
Let's see them.
Oh, you're the biggest pain. Okay, so we'll look for that.
Like this thing?
No, that's a packing cube.
Ooh. Is that what mine is? A packing cube?
Well, yours is part of a packing cube system. Yes, you have. For those of you who know packing cubes, I enjoy them. I have them all different sizes. Benny uses just one big rectangular bag for your medical supplies, and he carries that at home in his backpack. And it's great because it has everything in it, but it's horrible because it has everything in it. I like you should compartmentalize.
I already do that.
Give me a face.
In a different way.
Yeah. All right. So then you had everything packed and you had your medical bag of all your diabetes stuff inside a backpack that I assume you took everywhere. Yeah. Okay. Was it a Camelback? Did it have water? I don't remember.
No. So I had a hiking bag.
Right.
That I threw a Camelback bladder in.
Was it easy to get water all the time?
Oh, yeah. They made sure you had you weren't allowed off the bus if you didn't have 3 liters minimum of water with you.
Perfect. What about the plane ride there? That I know it's so long.
Oh my God.
But for
that
me,
was not fun.
For me, you got on a plane in Charlotte and you flew by yourself from Charlotte to Newark. Then you met the group, went Newark to Israel. And for me, once the Dexcom signal disappeared in Charlotte, like that was pretty much it. Because you got on the plane, it disappeared. You had it, but I didn't have it. That was pretty much it for the day for me. Because what am I going to do? Watch you. How was it? Did you do okay? Did you do anything special on the plane?
I didn't do anything special, like at all. When I got to Newark, my blood sugar did go low a little bit, but I had food and then I was fine.
You're told you look out for those baggage claim lows when you get off the plane after you've been on the plane for a while and start walking.
It was terribly described where they were going to be.
This is going to be one big complaint episode, I can tell. Grievances will be aired. Okay.
I'd just like to make it known I may complain a lot about it, but I loved it.
Thank you for that disclaimer. Because I know you loved it. You just like to complain when you get a chance.
Yeah.
So you get there. I promise I'm not going to go blow by blow the whole trip. But I am curious. That was a very long plane ride. As you said, you didn't do anything really special. Did you consider changing basal rates or walk around or anything? Well,
so the first the flight there, I didn't even think about it, and it worked out pretty fine. So on the way back, I didn't touch it.
All right. Well, that's Control IQ helping too.
Yeah.
That really helps a lot, because in the past, if you've been in the car for 3 or 4 hours or a plane ride, you've gone so high. So that's really good. Okay, so we had set up different basal rates in your pump because we assumed there would be a lot of activity. So as I recall, we had the regular one, then we had a 15% less insulin and a 30% less insulin, and we labeled them 15% less. Did you switch to that when you got there?
The first full day we were there, I switched immediately to the 30% less one, and I was high pretty much the entire day. And I did that for about a week, and then I texted you, and I thought the 15% less would be too much, so we made a 3% one. But eventually, I ended up just switching back to my normal basal rate, and I mean, that was fine.
One of the questions that we got and that I was going to ask you about here is talking about how difficult it was to carb count. Forget the activity for a moment too, but like with all the foods that you don't normally eat.
No, it was next to impossible to know exactly how much I ate. I just kind of guessed. And sometimes, or at least most of the time, breakfast and lunch, it was next to impossible to know how much I should give myself, because I didn't know what kind of activities we were doing, and I didn't know how like extraneous they would be.
Well, they would tell you in the morning though, wouldn't they, what you were doing? I mean, I knew what you were doing that day. Well,
they'd tell us the night before, but like it was vague. It was like, okay, we're going to go on a hike tomorrow, and that could mean we're going to walk 10 feet up in elevation, up some stairs, and then look at a valley, or it can mean we're going to walk through the negative for 4 days.
I feel like I should have asked you more about like when you were going high when you first got there, because you gave yourself 30% less insulin. How did you feel? Like, were you uncomfortable?
I was fine.
I know you never feel bad when you're high.
Well, I mean, sometimes.
Yeah, I know.
But yeah, no, I was fine.
But mentally, were you? I mean, I don't even know how to ask you, because you didn't get stressed out. You never get stressed out because of diabetes. Like, were you worried? Like,
no.
I don't know why I'm asking.
The only time I was worried about going low during the desert.
Yeah,
but that was about it.
So tell us about that. What was the desert when you say that? What was that part of the trip?
So it was like the 3rd or 4th day we were there, and they made us pack all our bags. We left the hotel. We put our big bag with a majority of our clothes under the bus, and we didn't see that for 3 days. We had a medium-sized like duffel bag, which had clothes for the next few days, and then we had our backpack.
Right.
So the bus would drive our medium bag to the next camping spot. We'd unload that, and we'd carry our normal bags with us. About 20 minutes into the first hike, I immediately went low. Oh. So the medic that was with us, like, prepared, I talked to her. She was great. She had like 4 like hand-sized bottles of like squeeze honey, and I downed like half of one, like 20 minutes into the trip. That was pretty much the hardest. Battling those lows was the hardest, like the most difficult thing I had with that diabetes pretty much the entire trip.
What was the medic's reaction? Was she just matter of fact? Was she cool?
She was a medic in the IDF. She had worked with kids with diabetes before she'd been on the trip. I mean, she was fine about it.
So she didn't make you feel weird?
No.
Okay. How was the honey?
It was pretty good. Eventually it just got to the point, because I mean, it was a constant battle through the entire trip, making sure I didn't go low. Eventually it just got to the point where I just like tap her on the shoulder and she'd be like, okay.
And that was 3 days?
Yeah.
Okay. So that was probably the hardest part.
Yeah.
Was those 3 days.
It didn't help that we were grotesquely underfed.
Okay, complain away. Hit me with the breakfast complaints.
For lunch and dinner, we're fine every day. I still don't understand why. But breakfast, we'd hike in the early hours of the morning, like 5:30 to 11. Breakfast every day was a cup of tea and a single cookie. And I will never understand it. We'd hike, and then at 11 we'd sit down and have lunch, and then we wouldn't do anything until dinner. And I don't understand why lunch and dinner were so big if we're not doing anything.
Did you ever put anything in your bag, like for the next morning once you
caught
up?
Well, so my friend Nathan had these like, those like gels that bikers use on their, yeah, he had a bunch of those. So I stole a couple. They had like 100 milligrams of caffeine in them too. It's perfect.
But you never put like a pita in your bag for the next day.
No. Dinners weren't like stuff we could take with us.
Yeah, I'm just kidding.
I mean, they were like, wow. I mean, it wasn't like we were literally in the middle of the desert with no way, you know, we had to walk or we wouldn't be able to get out. There was always, you know, bus was always a 20-minute drive away.
What food did you like the best?
Shawarma. Shawarma in a pita with hummus. There was some spice we could never figure out what it was. It looked like a red chili sauce, but they always just pointed at it and said, "You want spicy?" You know, that with, you know, lettuce, pickle, blah, 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 whatever. Every time, every lunch.
That was yummy.
So good.
I would assume that after a month of eating pretty much the same thing, you figured out how to dose for the food, if not for the activity.
Yeah. After a while, we stopped doing, you know, like intense, hard activity. So I kind of had to readjust again because it was like in the middle, it was, you know, it was hot and we'd walk a lot, but it wasn't like a hard, you know, like I'm going to die. It's 106 out.
So everybody wanted to know what surprised you.
About the trip? Or?
About the trip, about diabetes, whatever that means to you.
How bad the plane food was.
Oh, plane food has a reputation for being delicious. I can't imagine. Why would that surprise you?
Well, because I've never had like a long enough flight.
But I bet you ate it.
I didn't on the way back.
Oh.
Kind of gross.
That's what surprised you.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what surprised me.
Oh.
Okay.
So closer to the end of the trip, they took us around to a bunch of different kinds of people. We met Orthodox Jews, a Palestinian, a Druid. We met someone who just lives in Israel, you know, doesn't believe in anything. And we got all their perspectives on everything. And just the way, you know, as a complete outsider and the way they all see everything is just so different. And the way that they saw things compared to each other. I mean, I had never taken into like thought how different people could see the same thing.
That's really interesting. That's great. What surprised me the most was that you didn't have one instance while you were there, and this is all about diabetes for me, of the kind of thing where every once in a while you'll forget to put your pump back on, or you will have a site crap out and you won't change it, or just something happens where every once in a while you are 400, you know, for 3 hours. And I'm like, what's going on? And you're like, I fixed it. I need rage bolus and all that stuff. And I was sure that that was going to happen a lot. It didn't happen once. It didn't happen when you went high, you went low, but it didn't happen once. And I got to tell you, I'm so proud of you. And maybe that sounds like oh, you're welcome. Maybe it sounds like a low bar as you listen, but you send a 16-year-old off on by himself, right? Nobody was, and to be clear, no one was checking you every night. Nobody was, right, nudging you.
So Yoni, I love him. He is my favorite person of all time. I love you, Yoni. I know you're not listening. He was the counselor that we decided would check in on me, make sure I'm not dying, because he was in my cabin a couple years ago. The counselors would come around and do room checks, make sure everyone's in their room. And he'd always, you know, he'd like, Benny, are you dead? And that's what he'd say.
Jeez.
He'd go, Benny, are you dead? And we go, no, I'm good. And, but, you know, we both knew he meant like, is your blood sugar good? You know,
yeah,
are you dying? You know? And every once in a while, maybe once a week, I'd get a false low in the middle of the night because I'd be sleeping on my Dexcom. My Dexcom was super sensitive to compression lows.
Yeah, I know. Because I got those low alerts too.
Every low in the middle of the night, besides one or two of them, were compression lows.
Yeah.
And it was crazy.
But he was following you.
Yeah. So that's where I was going with that. He'd text me in the middle of the night, you know, like 1 a.m., 2 a.m. And he'd be like, do you need help? And because he'd wake up to it.
Sure. I shouldn't laugh. That's fantastic.
And don't get me wrong, it was funny. No, it was fine. And then in the morning, every day, I'd have to go up and like hug him and say, I'm sorry for waking him up.
But that was really cool. And I probably should have mentioned that already, that we did. That was part of our protocol. Yeah. And then on the other side of things, we decided I would follow. I turned off all my alarms except urgent low. And the idea was, well, what am I going to do if he's 50, right? And I'm in Charlotte and you're in Tel Aviv. Mm-hmm. So what we decided was I would not text you right away. I would wait like 20 minutes or something. And then I would text you. And if I couldn't get you, I would text Yoni. And then I would text
Adi.
And I think in my head, then I was like, and then I'll text the people in New York. And then I'll text the embassy. You know, like I had this plan in my head. Stop laughing at me. I was so nervous. Well, but it never got to that point because, let me just give you some credit. The 2 times, there was urgent lows that came in, but they resolved, or I could tell that they were fake. They resolved very quickly. There were 2 times when I texted you, and you texted me right back. And that was, I don't know if you know how great that was. That helped me so much that you just said, it's wrong, I'm fine. It was great. So thank you.
We had 3 Israelis on our bus as counselors. And then we had 2 Americans from Camp Coleman. One Israeli was like the main guy. He was our tour guide. I mean, he was also a counselor, but he was like the unit head of the bus.
Yeah.
But the other Israeli, Shai, me, Yoni, and Shai went outside on like the 3rd day. And Yoni was like, just in case I'm not there, I want you to show her how to awake you. So I showed her the HypoPen and the Beximi, showed her how to use it. And I told her, on my pump, if the number's red, use those. If it is yellow, do not use those.
Yeah, I don't use them both.
Yeah. You know, I told her one or the other.
Sure, I'm just kidding.
But like, if the number is yellow, do not use those. Call a hospital. Use the thing, then call a hospital. Every time we moved hotels, we'd get a new room with new people. So every night, on the first night, I'd tell them, you know, where the HypoPen and the Beximi are. I'd tell them how to use it, and I'd tell them not to use it unless you couldn't get hold of Yoni.
Yeah.
Or Shai. If anything happens, look at the number, call Yoni. If you can't get a hold of Yoni, keep going up the food chain until you can.
How did they react? Did anybody seem nervous?
No. Everyone was like, don't die. You know, like if I have to use this, I'm going to kill you. Everyone's super chill.
All right. I'm confused though. Red and yellow numbers, because I don't want.
So on the pump, if your blood sugar's low, the number, like where like tells you the actual number, it's red. And if you're high, it's yellow.
Oh, so you were saying don't give you the Beximi and the HypoPen if you're high.
Yeah.
I thought you were saying like give it faster the way you were telling the story. Okay. I was like,
so, yeah, if you look on the T-Slim, it's yelling at me right now.
I hear it.
My blood sugar is totally 120 right now. Perfect.
I saw what you ate before this interview, please.
But yeah, I told them on the right side of the screen, there's a number typically with an arrow. If that number is yellow and you give the HypoPen or the Beximi to me, that is very bad.
Got it. Okay. That's why you needed to go to the hospital. Yeah. Now I get it. You can tell I'm a very involved parent that I look at his pump all the time and I know the numbers. You know, you got the T-Slim right when I stopped looking at stuff.
Yeah.
And
started to stop looking at stuff.
Started to stop. But I mean, you were 12 because we're up for renewal now. So you were 12. And that's like exactly the time when I'm not going to start looking in your pants. Right. You should see his face. Sorry.
That was a weird way to word that.
But you know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to go in your pocket.
Yeah, no,
like, it's in your
mean.
pocket and you do it yourself. When you were little, I could have been like, give me your pump or let me see, you know, or with the Animus, though, we had the remote. So it was a lot easier. But yeah, so I'm familiar with the T-Slim, but it's not like you had Animus for 10 years and I could like fly through that pump. The T-Slim, I have to put my glasses on.
It's so funny because I can fly through this one too. But it's so funny watching her. Dad tried to do it once.
Bless his heart.
It was, oh my God, it was painful.
One of the other things that I was worried about was when you were going in the Dead Sea or doing some of the swimming, because not only is the Dead Sea super salty, some of the other places are salty too, but it's so salty, we've been told you have to protect your Dexcom transmitter. I know everything worked out. Did you cover it?
I did, and then it fell off in the Dead Sea.
The transmitter?
No, the cover.
Oh.
So we went in the middle of summer. The water was almost boiling.
You're coming, we're complaining.
It wasn't bearable. We all went in for like 10 seconds to see if we could float, and then we ran out. When we went, it was great.
I know.
And the water was warm.
Say nice things.
Did I not put a disclaimer? I loved the trip, but there was a lot to complain about.
So the Band-Aid thingy cover fell off?
Yeah, we had one of the clear, the clear one.
We just used a waterproof Tegadrop.
Band-Aid, yeah. So we got in, and it started to peel off, and then I got out and got back in for a second, and it came off, and, my Dexcom was fine.
Okay, good. That's good. Well, I guess you could have floated by. You would have seen it, if it had come off.
I did see it.
But I'm glad. So it did hit the salt a little bit, kept working. Yeah. All right, that's good to know. Did you wear anything on your feet? Remember I told you should bring shoes for that?
So remember those like $20 rubber shoes I got?
Yeah.
Those broke on the trip to Israel, like in my backpack. So one of them broke. So I had one on my left foot, and then the one on my right, I was like holding onto with my toes.
Yes.
And eventually I just kind of let it go.
But at the Dead Sea, were you able to wear anything on your feet?
Yeah, that.
Oh, those. Good, because that stuff hurts.
Well, I took them off eventually because, whatever.
Oh, to be young. All right, so let's talk about diabetes tech and gear and everything. It didn't seem to me like you had any issues. We gave you, I said 150% of supplies. I think I gave you 300% of Dexcom and insets, so I probably lied on that.
I
packed
had
so
a lot
many.
of insets.
Yeah. So you didn't run out. You didn't have any troubles. It didn't look like you lost anything, really. I remember texting you at one point. I can't remember why we were texting, but you said something like, I think I was pretending to joke, but really telling you like, hey, make sure you change your inset, because I was trying to stay away and not do it. And then I was trying to do like that mom thing where you joke, but you really, and you said, I just changed it because it fell off in the ocean. So did you have an issue with stuff coming off in the water?
No.
Or okay.
Well, we were only in the water twice.
Oh, there you go. Did you change your inset every 3 days? Like,
I didn't.
It
was either until it stopped working or it fell off.
I hate that you do that. Come on, man.
Well, my skin heals fast enough for it, so.
All right. This is the point in the podcast where I give the disclaimer again that Benny has had diabetes for a very long time. He knows what he's doing. We wish certain things would be
she's
better.
The world's worst diabetes mom.
But at some point, I have to kind of let him make some mistakes, and I can only yell at him when he's home. So I'm glad you changed it when you needed to. I can tell by your numbers that, everything was okay. I will tell you that my biggest fear was not an emergency, although obviously that's very fearful to think about because I knew you had a medic. I knew Israel has good health care. I wasn't worried about that kind of stuff. I mean, I was worried that diabetes would slow you down and make you feel different, give you problems that your friends wouldn't have. He's smiling that make you feel different. Yes, I would.
Did you really?
Of course, that's what I worry about the most.
I thought we got over that phase.
You got over it a long time ago, but I worry still that what I mean by that is by slow you down is you'd be on a hike and you would go low and they'd have to stop and everybody else would go ahead. And then you'd be like with the staff catching up and feeling bad, or you'd be on a camel. Like you got to ride a camel.
That was so much fun and so disappointing at the same time. Okay.
All right. You tell the story. Then I'll tell you my fear.
They hyped us up for this camel ride for a full week. We got on the camels, walked 2 minutes in the direction we were supposed to be heading, and then walked back. They made it sound like we were going to full day through the desert on the camels.
You thought you were going to adopt a camel and bring it home.
Yes.
I have never been on a camel, so that's 2 minutes more than me.
Did you know that camel milk is actually designated as a superfood because it has all the vital nutrients?
I just read somewhere, and I'm not putting it in my newscast because it looks like garbage to me, that camel milk cures type 2 diabetes.
Because that's real, yeah.
That makes sense. But I just read that this afternoon. Yeah, it is a superfood, though, right? It's supposed to be really nutritious.
It has all the essential nutrients.
Oh, how fabulous. But my fear would be that you'd be on the camel, you'd be low, you'd feel lousy, you'd have to get off, right? You'd miss out on things. And your friends would be like, oh, why are you slowing us down? He's laughing at me. But that's the kind of stuff I worry about that more because you are smart enough. The one thing that I really think we've really taught you well is that when you need help, you ask for it. You don't let things go. Right? You're not going to be in pain or feel uncomfortable and not tell somebody. And with diabetes, I think that's really, really important. So I know you laugh at me, but I worry about the feeling different, even though you're pretty cool about the whole thing now.
Well, I mean, I don't worry about that, but it's also the fact that I don't hang around people that would dislike me for something I can't control. I don't interact with those kind of people. If we all had to stop, which, we almost never had to stop for me. I mean, I could keep going and drink honey at the same time. But we stopped a lot anyway, just because everyone got tired. If we stopped because of me, everyone would be like, oh, thank God we're stopping. Instead of what the, I don't know, can I?
No.
What the heck, Benny?
Thank you. All right, so here's a question from my friend Steven, who says, at this camp, how often did you think about diabetes versus how often you thought about diabetes at diabetes camp? It's been a while since you've been to diabetes camp, but
diabetes camp, in my opinion, made diabetes feel like a disability more than anything I've experienced.
Well, actually, tell me more about that.
Every time we were doing something, they were like, I don't know how to explain it. It's just everything was centered around it. And someone did their inset for the first time by themselves, which, good for you, pat on the back. The entire cafeteria would clap for them. Like, wow, you just conquered cancer. I mean, I don't mean to compare it to that, but from my opinion, it's like they were the mindset of the staff was even if they did have diabetes, the mindset was these kids have the worst life in the world and I need to try and make it better for a week.
Interesting, because when you were little, when you were 7 or 8, and you did your NSAID for yourself for the first time, didn't they applaud you? Didn't that feel good at the time?
At the time, but like I look back on it and it's like, okay, you clapped for me. That didn't change my life. If you clapped for me and my pancreas started working again.
I think I'm going to kind of keep this as a time capsule thing because I think that your perspective may change as you get older, but I think very valid, right? And you're 16, but I think diabetes camp, I will agree to disagree. I think it prepared you for Camp Coleman.
It might have, but.
So back to the question, if you think you can answer it, did you think about diabetes more or less?
Less, significantly less. Just because everything at diabetes camp was centered around diabetes. I mean, everything was like, all right, check your blood sugar now. I can check my blood sugar when I need to. I don't need someone 5 years older than me to tell me that I need to check my blood sugar and that something I've been doing for 10 years is wrong because they think it's wrong. You know, they wouldn't let me use my Dexcom as my number until one of the last years I was there.
Yeah.
And we had been doing that for 4 years by then.
Yeah. So when you're on a trip like this, maybe because you're the only one, somebody like you who's confident doesn't really feel like they need tons of, I don't know if support's the right word, but you don't need a lot of attention to diabetes now other than yourself. You felt like you thought about it less, just enough to take care of what you need to take care of.
Yeah.
How do you do that? I'm curious just for a little insight into your psychology. Do you wait until you get an alarm? Are you thinking about it when you're eating? Like, how does it work?
I wait until I get an alarm. It is not on my mind until something is wrong.
Well, you bolus for food. Please tell me you bolus for food when you eat.
Well, yeah, but like...
Other than that,
diabetes 90% of the time, unless something's wrong with it, it's, you know, it's not on my mind.
Just in the background.
Yeah.
I think this interview is good. I'm not sure if people will stop listening to me because you're so crazy.
I don't know. I think every time I'm on the show, your views go up a bit.
Oh yeah.
I can eat the mic again if
No, please don't. So Stephen went on to say, is there a lesson in the different kinds of attention? Is there a lesson in there for you as you get older, or do you view diabetes camp at camp like this as being completely non-related? Because
I know what you're going to say.
My answer is that diabetes camp, even though you enjoyed it less as you got older, diabetes camp when you were younger prepared you to be more independent, whether you remember it or not. Because I remember Benny before diabetes camp and Benny after diabetes camp. That's all I'll say.
Yeah. You know, looking at it right now, I think I would have done just fine at Coleman not without kudos. Definitely kudos. I think everyone should go to kudos. It is the best thing in the world.
That's for little kids.
Yeah. It is amazing. Unless it's changed. If it hasn't changed, send your kids there right now. But CCT and Morris, they're good for kids that aren't, 100% confident in themselves. But, I mean, by the time I was like 9, 10, I had already gotten comfortable with the fact that I had diabetes and I couldn't change it. So why be sad about it?
Well, and that leads us to another question that someone had. Sally asked, do you ever feel it's unfair that you have diabetes? And if so, how do you work through those thoughts?
I absolutely think it's unfair. I mean, it sucks, but the way I look at it, it's just, I can't change it. What am I going to do about it? Why be sad about it? And then I move on.
You've always kind of been that way in terms of accepting diabetes. And when you were very young, you didn't really understand what's going on.
Yeah.
And then once or twice in middle school, you had some real, I'm really upset about this, but we just talked it through. Do you remember ever kind of feeling differently, or have you always, you're just such an easygoing kid.
Yeah. Every once in a while when 2 or 3 insets wouldn't work and I had to change my Dexcom, my inset, and my cartridge at the same time, I'd lose my transmitter, every once in a while it's like, this sucks. But I mean, that comes around so rarely. There's so very little times when I genuinely can't do something because of diabetes. I mean, there are times I can't do things, but not because of diabetes. But I've learned to just, what are you going to do?
I think, too, the fact that I'll pat myself on the back, I guess, a little, in that we've never really told you couldn't do it. We've let you do all these crazy things, even though I'm at home, frankly, wanting to puke because you're in Israel. Like, what was I thinking? But we let you do it. And hopefully that helps with your attitude. I'm hoping that it helps you, as you get older. Oh, it's the worst. Okay. All right. We got to start wrapping it up.
No.
So you hurt your foot while you were there. You can tell that story if you want to in whatever detail you want to. But I am curious, when you got to the doctors in Israel, you kicked a coral? What happened?
Okay. So over, a couple events happened. I ended up getting a pretty nasty infection on my foot.
When you saw the doctors in Israel, did they talk to you about diabetes? Did anybody? Because for the feet, sometimes people get the wrong idea and freak out.
So I don't really know what the healthcare system is because, everyone spoke Hebrew. I just kind of went along with it. I was with Shy.
So she was translating.
Yeah. Well, she just told me, okay, we're going to do this now. I felt perfectly safe.
I'm sure. I'm just saying. But she speaks Hebrew and English.
Yeah. So we get into the clinic. We go to the front desk. We tell them what's wrong. They said, okay, wait here. She told me this process normally takes about 4 or 5 hours. We were done in like 45.
That's great.
We go in to the room. We sit there for maybe a minute waiting for the doctor. He comes in. He takes like 2 looks at my foot. He like touches it for a second. He's like, does it hurt? And I'm like, sometimes. He's like, yeah, it's just really bad infection. So he gave me a prescription for antibiotics and an antibacterial cream. And then we went to the pharmacy and got them.
So there wasn't a lot of discussion about having diabetes. Nobody asked you.
It wasn't even a thought.
All right. Well, I like that and I don't like that. I mean, obviously you can take antibiotics. That's not a big deal. But, it makes me a little nervous.
If I was concerned with it, I would have said something.
I know. And then the opposite spectrum is they fuss over feet too much because they think,
my God. Have you ever told the story about Coleman?
We'll tell it again real quick. Can I tell it?
Yeah.
Okay. Basically, about 2 or 3 years ago at the end of camp, Benny had a large blister on his foot and went to the infirmary to get a Band-Aid for it. And they sat him down. They soaked the foot. They called me. They made me promise to bring him to the endocrinologist. They were very concerned about his footwear. They wanted special diabetes socks. Now, listen, if you're newer to diabetes, neuropathy and feet can be a big issue if you've had elevated blood sugars for years. It's not going to happen at a 14-year-old type 1 with good A1Cs. What happened was I yelled at them, Benny, I don't know if you heard, but I said, give me Benny. And he got on the phone and I said, are they scaring you? Like, did they make you think there's something wrong with your feet? Like, blah, blah, blah. And he was like, Mom, it's fine. It's fine. And I was just terrified they were going to put thoughts in your head that didn't belong there. And then I wasn't going to bring you to the endo because we didn't need to. But finally, when I saw him, we told him the story and he was like, should I examine your feet? And he was like, no, it's fine. All right. It was great. He was like, okay, are you good? You're good.
I think the funniest part of it all was, so there's one nurse there every year that's only there for the first 2 weeks, which is a shame because she is the best. She knows that I know what I'm doing and trusts me.
Right.
So at the nurse's office at camp, there's the front desk and then there's a closet in the back with all the meds. I just kind of go in the back and get my shit. But, most of the other nurses are like, oh my God, what's wrong? Are you okay?
That's Karen, by the way, who you love.
I love Karen so much.
Yeah.
Karen was either in the process of leaving or was leaving the next day. And she walked in after everything had happened. She wasn't there yet. And she was like, Benny, what are you doing? And I was like, they made me do this.
It was fine. It was all fine.
Yeah, no, I'm not mad, upset about it. I just think it's funny.
You roll with those things very well.
Okay, so the camp director of Coleman is leaving, yes. Which is very sad. I love Bobby so much. Me and him have a pretty good relationship. But there's a video of him going on the zip line over the lake, and he flips upside down. And it is so funny. I will show you later.
Okay. He loves you. I think he appreciated that you took on the challenge of going to regular camp with diabetes, and they've always been very good to us. But to start wrapping this up, are you glad you went with all the work that you had to do?
I am so happy I went. I'm so happy you guys let me go. It was amazing.
What would your advice be to other kids that are looking at programs that are difficult like this?
Take a chill pill. It is going to be fine. If you know what you're doing at home, you know what you're doing anywhere. If you trust yourself enough to go out to dinner one night, I think you trust yourself enough to go somewhere without your parents for a couple days. It might not be a month-long trip in a foreign country. It might be to your friend's house for a couple days. But if you think or know, and you trust yourself enough to be able to take care of yourself for a couple days, I think you should go for it. You're always going to have someone with you, or at least you should, that cares about you and will do things that you need for you.
Right. As a minor going on these programs is what you mean, right?
Yeah. Especially on these programs, there's always going to be at least 2 or 3 people that can and will help you with whatever you need.
I have a weird question for you.
Yeah.
You don't have to answer this. We stress experience, confidence, responsibility over perfect numbers. Mm-hmm. Do you sometimes worry about your health or your numbers or anything like that? Why? Why do you feel good about it? I mean, I think you're doing great. I don't want you to think you're not. But your A1C is not going to be 5.8.
Yeah. I mean, my thing is, you got to enjoy life. You can't worry about every little thing all the time. If your blood sugar goes high, your blood sugar goes high. Darn it. Give yourself some insulin and go have some damn ice cream. Sorry.
Well, don't have ice cream when you're high.
But if you're 200 and your friends want to go get ice cream, go give yourself some insulin and go get ice cream. Don't say no because you don't want your number to be perfect. Can I tell them the celery eating kid crying in the corner joke?
You could try.
So we have a joke. There are some parents that are really strict with their kids, and those kids eat celery and cry in a corner all day.
And I worry sometimes that the kids eating celery and crying in the corner are going to be healthier long term.
Well, so the thing is, they have those kids that are eating celery and crying in the corner have perfect numbers. I don't have perfect numbers, and I'm doing not crying in a corner.
I don't think those are your only two options.
But I mean, it gets the point across, unhappy, perfect numbers. You might live a full life and have perfect numbers if you do good for you. You're top 0.1% of diabetics. But there's no point in worrying about being perfect all the time because it's unrealistic and it's not fun.
So the last question here is, when you came home, I said, it's going to be really hard for me to feel good about nagging you all the time since you just did a month successfully away from me. You're going to be a junior in high school. We're looking ahead to college. So I was joking and I said, I want to try to be here just for customer support. Like, you tell me when you need me and I'm here for you, but I don't want to be in your face anymore, reminding you. It's been 3 weeks. This has been so hard because you're in my house and now I see everything and I know what's going on. How are we doing on that? Is this a good situation for you?
This is perfect.
Oh, God, I was hoping you wouldn't say that. I want to nag you more. But this is good?
You have done great. You have done wonderful. And if you want to get a bit more naggy, you can get a bit more naggy. It's not going to change anything, but...
All I want is for you to change that inset every 3 days. Put it on your calendar.
I don't use my calendar. Only old people use a calendar.
It's the worst.
Benny. I'll try harder, though.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
I don't know.
Thank you very much for joining me. I appreciate you coming on. As always, I don't know how much of this I can actually use. We see Dr. Vanderwell next week. We go back to the endo next week, so you can tell him all about your adventures. In fact, I need to take all the forms with us for Dr. V next week because we need your DMMP and I'm looking for the forms. He's making fun of me looking around because we have a DMMP. We have your 504. I got to get all that stuff.
My 401k. I have one. It has $7 in it.
You really do, from the grocery store. All right, we'll leave it there. Benny, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it. I'm so glad you're home safe.
Love you. If your listener count doesn't go up for this episode, I'm suing.
You're listening to Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
Oh, boy. So you tell me, good idea to put him on the show? Let me know what you think. And I will link to our other episodes with Benny and, when he was younger and maybe had some different opinions about things. You can listen to those at diabetes-connections.com. Click on the episode homepage. I also want to mention, I realized that we left out a question that you may have, which is how did we keep the insulin cool? How did we keep the supplies cool? As you heard Benny talking about, hiking through the desert and swimming in the Dead Sea and all that. And it was very, very hot in Israel at the time that he was there. And so the backpack that he carried with him that had about 3 to 5 days of supplies in it, we had the vial, the insulin vial that he carried with him in a Frio, the pack that you can wet. We've talked about this many times before. It keeps insulin at room temperature. It does not keep it cold, but it was a little Frio pack that he could keep his vial in. And we also used a VIVI Cap, and that was new for us. And that's something that you can only use on pens right now. They're working on vials, but that worked out really well. And you take the actual cap off your insulin pen. You slide the VIVI Cap on it. It just looks like a bigger, fatter insulin pen cap. If I'm describing it correctly, I'll put a link in the show notes too. And it's got a little battery in it that you don't have to replace. It lasts for a year and it keeps it room temperature, just like a Frio. And that was phenomenal as well because that pen was really there as a backup. Benny uses vials, but he'll use an insulin pen as a backup if he needs to take a shot, if he needs to pull the insulin out and stick it in his pump, that kind of thing. And that lasted the entire time. He actually never used the pen, which surprised me. He says he actually forgot it was in his bag. So when he came home, we decided to see how well the VIVI Cap worked. And we pulled the insulin out of that pen. It had been at that point 5 weeks, so longer than you're supposed to use insulin. FDA people don't listen. We put it in his pump. And that backpack had been right through the desert, 100 degrees or more, with him the entire trip. The insulin in the pen worked fine. So big thumbs up on VIVI Cap. But that's how we did it. And the rest of the supplies were kept on the bus or in the hotel. Those were kept cool while he was traveling. So he had a separate backpack that he would pull from So the main supplies for the entire month were kept in one place. The backpack supplies were for 3 to 5 days, were kept with Benny the entire time. So it was an interesting way to do it. If you have longer term travel stories, we've talked to a lot of people who've traveled the world with diabetes. I'd love to hear more. I'm always interested in packing kind of stories. All right, I want to tell you about my really low point when Benny was gone, because I had some very nerve-wracking moments, but I had one that I want to tell you about for sure. And I was so lucky it happened while I was at the Friends for Life conference. So every summer when I send Benny away for 4 weeks, when I send my daughter away for 4 weeks, both of my kids went to the same camp. They both went away for, a month every summer since they were 8 or 9. I would get the same kind of questions from all of my friends. Don't you miss them? How can you send them away? Don't they miss you? Aren't you worried about them? And then from my diabetes friends, I would get lots of different questions, right? Like, how are you doing that if the camp is not a diabetes camp? Don't you freak out when you can't follow him? Because we never used share and follow at camp. All sorts of questions and worries and things like that. So I honestly didn't talk a lot about this Israel trip other than to a few close friends, because I knew that being around other moms with type 1 would be supportive, like most of them would be great. But I also knew that some of the questions would make me even more nervous than I was. And I was really nervous about this. Letting Benny get on that plane. I didn't even go to the airport when we dropped him off in Charlotte. My husband had to take him to the airport because I knew I would just be so nervous. And I didn't want to make Benny embarrassed or freak out. I mean, he's so calm and cool, but I didn't want to pass that nervousness off to him because I knew he was ready and I knew he'd be safe. I knew this was a good group of people, but I was freaking out. So I didn't even go to the airport to drop him off. I made it. I did okay. The first couple of days were very, very, very hard. But when I got to Friends for Life, which was about 2 weeks in, I felt great. And people were, we were talking about it and they were very supportive. But I also felt really almost more nervous in a way. And I still don't know exactly what that was all about. But I think part of it was I had worked out a plan. And I'll be very frank, I had worked this out with my therapist. I've been seeing a therapist for a couple of years, not just for diabetes, but because life is just so freaking stressful anyway. But we had worked out a plan that I thought was really good. I would only check Benny's numbers. And I shared this on an episode a couple of weeks ago. I would only check his numbers at times of day that I decided. I would check them twice a day. We had turned off all the alarms except for the urgent low. And I did that October of 2020. That had nothing to do with Israel. That's just in our developmental teenage plan that has worked really well for us. So I only had the urgent low. And I said, I'm only going to check it at these times of day. Well, when I got to Friends for Life, we were all having like a mom meetup and everybody threw their phones on the table. And I really should share this picture. It was fabulous. Whatever your kid is, who cares, high, low, out of range, in range, whatever. Let's all show at this moment of time where our kid's number is. And I didn't do it because it wasn't the time of day to check his number. And I just didn't want to do it. And they were like, this is a great group of moms, super supportive. They were laughing, everybody was doing it. And finally I was like, okay, I'm going to peek. I'm just going to peek. And wouldn't you know it, he was 78 double arrows down. I didn't get an alarm because, as I said, all my alarms were off except urgent low. And I burst into tears. It just all came out at that moment. It was so stressful. It was so much. I'm not trying to be dramatic. I mean, you know what I'm talking about. But 78 double arrows down, and I'm thousands of miles away. And I don't know why it hit me so hard at that moment. Did I feel left out because I couldn't just look at my kid's number? Did I feel left out because I had taken, what many would consider a big risk? Did I regret it? I mean, I still haven't processed all those feelings. I'm still working it out. But oh my gosh, did I get hugs? Did I get support? Did I get people who understand? Thank you, Heather. And thank you, Heather, my 2 Heathers. And thank you to everybody who really made me feel okay and not judged. And of course, a few minutes later, the number turned around. I didn't call him. That wasn't part of our agreement. It turned around and he was fine. Now, later that night, you heard Benny and I talk about that one urgent low that I called him because it was like 20 minutes and I kept going off. And it was a compression low. It was fine. And he texted me back right away. That was actually that same night, but much later. It was about 11 or 11:30 our time. So, he did what he was supposed to do. He communicated with me. But boy, was I excited to have my community around me when I needed them the most. Nobody understands like we do. Nobody understands that pit of your stomach feeling. I knew he was safe. I knew he was okay. But still, diabetes. I'm sure I'll be sharing more about this experience in, if not the months, the years to come, probably. We're still learning a lot from it. I hope to be able to, give some wisdom, maybe some advice about just your down the block sleepover because of it. Interesting note, I can't say we paved the way for anybody. I don't know if I've mentioned this. Benny was not the first kid with type 1 to go on this trip. Kudos to those other parents. I obviously don't know who they are, but knowing that other kids had done it certainly made us feel better, and it made it easier because the program knew that it could be done, right? The leadership of the program knew it could be done. All right. I'm Stacey Sims. I'll see you back here in just a couple of days. Until then, be kind to yourself.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Sims Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.